identity of former CIA operative Valerie Plame appeared for the first time in a Washington Post column on July 14, 2003. What followed, the fallout, the investigation, the speculation around the Bush White House, and the guilty verdict for Dick Cheney's former chief of staff, Scooter Libby, that story is told in a new film called Fair Game, with brilliant performances by Naomi Watts and Sean Penn.
I gotta be at the airport in 45 minutes.
Have a good trip.
I love you.
I promise I'll behave.
I promise to behave.
See, everyone's on their best behavior.
I want you to head up operations. This is top priority.
You're in business with a terror organization. Who are you? If you get out of this car, I can't protect you. You have no idea what we can and cannot do.
Valerie, your name is in the paper. It says you're a CIA agent.
Wilson never worked for the CIA, but his wife...
As an agency operative...
You killed people. I can't tell you anything.
In our spotlight tonight, Valerie Plame and Joe Wilson. I talked to them both in an interview taped earlier. Joining me now, Valerie Plame and Ambassador Joe Wilson. You know, this is a great movie. I've had the chance to see it. And first of all, Valerie, I just have to say, it does not seem easy being married to Joe Wilson when you watch this movie.
We like to joke that we feel we've been married for about 48 years now. And we've condensed a lot of living into a short period of time. But the truth is that when we met, it really was love at first sight, and which was a good thing because we've been through a lot.
Well, it's a great couple story. It is a real marriage put through stress story, and beginning with the notion of fair game. Could you explain the title?
The title comes from a comment made by Chris Matthews, who had just gotten off the phone with Karl Rove, and Karl Rove said, "Wilson's wife, she's fair game." And and then I believe it was Chris who spoke to Joe after that and conveyed that information.
Chris called me right afterwards and said in his own breathless way, "Joe, it's Chris Matthews. I just got off the phone with Karl Rove. He says your wife is fair game. I gotta go." And then he hung up.
Yeah, it's a great moment in the movie. And how involved were you with this movie? It's based on your books, but were you on set? Were you helping Sean Penn with that performance, which is just extraordinary?
We took turns being consultants on the set, and both of us have gotten to know and Naomi Watts and Sean Penn, Sean and Joe have spent quite a bit of time together at our home, and Naomi and I have become really good friends.
I actually like to think, Lawrence, that I'm a little bit more adept at cutting up people at dinners and in bars than the way Sean portrayed it, but both my son and my wife say that he did a pretty good job of portraying me.
Now, where is closure for you in this story? Scooter Libby was convicted. He was then pardoned by the president. You've gotten your say out there in these books and now in this movie. Do you feel as though you have closure? And then secondly, do you consider the country to have closure in this story?
I think film is able to tell a story in a way that other media cannot, and I think it is a very powerful film. It tells a period of time. It tells a story of speaking truth to power and the consequences personally and outside of that. I really am. It's a piece of film that I'm very proud of. I think Joe feels the same way. And how would you say, you know, for the country at large?
You know, I think that this tells the history of our time. Hopefully it clarifies for people and removes some of the chaff that was thrown up by those who decided that rather than address the real issues, which is why we went to war, they tried to change the subject to Wilson and his wife. It clears all that up. The problem I think we have is that people like Karl Rove, who essentially betrayed the national security of this country, have now institutionalized their smear and fear campaign tactics. And hopefully people will begin to see, as they see this movie, what the lessons are from that time and learn those lessons as we go forward.
I mentioned that Scooter Libby was pardoned. He was actually commuted, which means that President Bush did feel there was a validity in that conviction. He is played brilliantly, I think, in the movie by David Andrews, and I don't think people will expect this, but I found it to be a sympathetic portrayal in that stunning scene where Scooter Libby is talking to an analyst and talking about the margins of error that you can tolerate in intelligence. He was peppering back and forth the issue of, well, are you 99% certain? Are you 97% certain? And that, to me, Valerie, seems like the central difference in how the Cheney world was thinking about this and how professionals think about it. It seems that after 9/11, Dick Cheney, Scooter Libby were not willing to tolerate intelligence that allowed for a 1% or 2% possibility of disagreement, whereas in the past you needed 90% or 70% or 80% certainty in getting something. These guys were willing to go into Iraq on a very slight chance that there were weapons of mass destruction at that point.
Indeed, it follows Ron Suskind's book titled The 1% Doctrine, sets this up beautifully, and it explains it, that their tolerance for, and their view of the world, if there was only a 1% chance, what they would do in order to, in their minds, defend national security. And what was lost in all that, of course, and we're a nation 10 years into this that is still roiled and suffering from the issues that came from that of undermining constitutional rights and civil liberties, and this is a legacy we're going to be living with for a long time.
Joe, I think any of us who've had government jobs in any capacity recognize the burden of dealing with decisions like the White House was facing, and I'm sure you do too. And in that scene in particular, what Scooter Libby, the weight Scooter Libby and the Vice President were feeling in a post-9/11 world about what the threat capacity was against them and what is the tolerance level they should live with, if any. But what else? What else should Scooter Libby have been including in his view of this that he did not include at that time?
Well, I think one of the lessons, Lawrence, of the last 10 years is that if you're wrong on your 1% doctrine, the consequences are enormous. I was just in Baghdad 3 weeks ago, and I can tell you, I left slack-jawed. I was there for the first time after 20 years. 7 years into the occupation, you still have to be fully armored to go from the airport to the embassy 6 miles. At the hotel, we still took incoming mortar every night I was there. And so I think the lesson in this is you need to have professionals helping you do the analysis without pressure so that you can come to rational decisions based on both the threats and the consequences of being wrong. And I go back to just in the run-up to the war when we did not have a serious discussion as to whether or not the threat that Saddam posed was truly existential or meritorious of the mobilization of our entire national security apparatus.
And as a former intelligence officer, I have to say the dismay that I and all my former colleagues see of how the entire apparatus has been politicized. Perhaps it's not as severe now, but clearly the entire infrastructure that is set up to deliver senior policymakers' intelligence is sclerotic and bureaucratic, and it does not deliver the bang for the buck.
Valerie Plame and Joe Wilson, the movie is fair game. It opens in select cities November 5th. Thank you both.
Thank you, Lawrence.